Hello, my name is Cooper Henderson, and I'm here to talk to you about imposter syndrome. Now, according to Dr. Dina Bravata, the 14,654 tests that she did, up to 82% of people in some locations will experience imposter syndrome once in their life. Now, as you can tell by those numbers, that means that there's a chance of more than 4/5 of the people in this very room who will experience imposter syndrome once. Actually, I am very close to people who experience imposter syndrome, and I've dedicated hours of research on this topic to see how I could better help my friends and family that need it most. First, we'll go over what imposter syndrome is. Then, we'll go over how the pandemic affected imposter syndrome. And lastly, we'll go over how to treat imposter syndrome. Let's go over what imposter syndrome really is. Now, there's different levels of intensity that different people experience. But basically, it's the combination of the feeling that you don't know what you're doing and that all your success is based on luck. And the fear that you'll be found out that you don't know what you're doing. Now, according to psychotherapist Deborah Dingman, she described people who are suffering from imposter syndrome as somebody who is unable to internalize the feeling of talent and feeling of being competent, and instead attributes their success towards external factors unrelated to ability. Now, while Mike Cannon Brooks, CEO of Atlassian and imposter syndrome victim, actually described it in the quote, "It's not a fear of failure. It's not a fear of not being able to do it. It's more of a fear that you'll be found out they don't know what you're doing." Now, in my research, it actually all points to that more successful people, such as med school students described in Treat the Cause, Not the Symptom by Dr. Malengi and Dr. Jagsky, feel this imposter feeling more intensified because of the success that they have. This is supported by the research of Professor George Krauss, who turned his students' stories into statistics, and he found out that the top percentile of people who experience this are actually high achievers. Now, as we go back to the personal experience with Mike Cannon Brooks, he talks about two very successful people, Neil Gaiman, an esteemed writer, and Belmiro de Azevedo, a very successful entrepreneur, feel these feelings very intensified because of the mass success that they have. Now that we know what imposter syndrome is, let's talk about how the pandemic affected it. Now, as you know, the pandemic forced many people back to their homes for isolation, and all the people affected had the ability to hang out with friends taken away from them. Some people even had to stay home alone because they live alone. According to the Wall Street Journal, 28% of households are actually individual people. So going by this logic, that means that they had more time to reflect because they weren't hanging out with friends, and they could reflect on themselves and their feelings. This led to imposter syndrome creeping up on them and being more prominent and intense than ever before because of their isolation. Now that we know how the pandemic affected imposter syndrome, let's see how you treat this imposter syndrome. As it turns out, sadly, there is no specific treatment. There is no pill that can take it all away. Actually, to the research of Dina Bravata, she says the exact same thing that I did. She says that there's no specific proven treatment that will work. But it is supported to talk out these feelings with yourself and with other people that experience this and actually turn it into inspiration to prove yourself wrong. According to Deborah Dingman, she says that group therapy with people who have similar feelings often helps you get rid of those feelings quicker, and you'll be able to talk yourself out of it sooner because you talk with other people about it. And one last time to Mike Cannon Brooks, and actually the tail end of his speech was all about how he used his imposter feelings, and he used them as an inspiration to prove himself wrong, to make sure that he knew he wasn't an imposter. In conclusion, imposter syndrome is when you feel like you don't know what you're doing and that all of your success is based on luck and you're scared that someone's going to find out. The pandemic enhanced these feelings by making them more prominent and more intense. And there is no specific treatment, but you should talk them out with yourself, others, and use it as inspiration to prove yourself wrong. Now, I know it's very common, actually, as you saw by my beautiful illustration. But it's also a reminder, you're not alone. Actually, you'll never be alone, because when you feel those feelings, just remember, you're part of that 82% of people that can experience this. So you could probably find somebody in your own town that you could talk these feelings out with. So you're never alone. Go find somebody, talk to them, and they'll be able to help.